Good afternoon, everyone. Calling to order the budget workshop meeting. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Markert,
I'm here.
Mr. Long,
Here.
Ms. Cassell. Here. Mayor Carney.
Here. Okay, we have today an overview of the capital improvement program and the proposed operating budget. We have two presentations to be made by staff, one by Mr. Moore and one by Mr. Dunkley, right? So which one do you want to go first?
I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. To those in attendance as well. The Office of the City Manager is pleased to recommend a proposed budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 in accordance with the City Charter and State of Florida statutes as they are applicable to the costs. Recommendations specifically are a principal function of feedback having been experienced since the June 11th, 2024 City Commission meeting, of which a general consensus on part of most of you was to maintain levels of service as they currently stand and to do what we can to identify efficiencies in operations to achieve minimal impacts to all concerned. Likewise, we have a fairly robust presentation that features a series of econometrics and data analytics that outlines for the City Commission why we are where we are and why the proposed overall recommendations make sense. Much of the proposed budget process for any given fiscal year does incorporate capital improvement program considerations, which will be a follow-up presentation accompanying both myself and Chief Financial Officer Hugh Dunkley. Will be other department directors, notably Director of Public Works, Missy Barletto, whose department is responsible for facility operations and related details. Also, Mr. Hajimiri, Director of Utilities, and Mr. Sam Mitat, who is responsible for Parks and Recreation, given the number of facilities and specific operations associated with that environment. Likewise, I'd like to go ahead and begin with the overall presentation because I think the City Commission and the public should likewise appreciate the specific overview with respect to econometrics and data analytics so that we can have a sense as to where we are. Next page, please. First of all, citywide operating budget types of funds. We have an internal services fund, $40.6 million, an enterprise fund, which is a series of functions, notably the utilities operation at about $126 million. The general fund, of course, dependent on property tax ad valorem revenues that make up the bulk of general service operations for the city of Delray Beach, special revenue funds, and debt service fund, which is actually the smallest amount, $4 million, or about 1% of the total aggregate budget of $389.6 million. Next slide, please. Likewise, a proposed millage rate consideration we are making available is 6.2611 for operating with a debt millage rate of 0.0337 for an aggregate total millage rate of 6.2948. This is actually 1/10 reduction in millage rate for the current fiscal year, and much of this is a function of the expectations communicated via the June 11th meeting to maintain level of service operations as well as to continue to offer commitments with respect to capital improvements and other commitments having been made publicly by both the current council and some of the work that was initiated by prior councils as well, or commissions as well. Next slide, please. Total millage rate, again, the difference from the current fiscal year, 0.2034. And again, speaking about the average millage rate, it's important to underscore the 1/10 reduction. There had been some commentary experienced individually in terms of adverse impacts to the individual property tax payer. I therefore directed an econometric exercise to determine what the average taxpayer or property owner in the city of Delray Beach might experience in terms of costs for their ad valorem bill for the upcoming fiscal year vis-a-vis that of the current year. Current average millage or average tax bill for the property owner in the city of Delray Beach is approximately $19.49 current fiscal year. For the upcoming fiscal year, based on the recommendations to go to 6.2611 operating millage, that is anticipated at approximately $1,945, a difference of about $4. One may argue that that's not a significant adjustment downward. However, I think it's important to underscore that there are some efficiencies identified in the proposed budget process to enable the city of Delray Beach to offer a recommendation in this regard. So a very slight decrease in cost to the average property homeowner in the city of Delray Beach, Florida, as a result of the recommendation being offered at this time. Next slide, please. This is simply a chart to feature millage rate history. So there's been a continued downward trend. I've been on board with the city of Delray Beach for about 3 years approximately, and there have been several adjustments downward, beginning in 2021, 2020, 22, 6.6611, 2023, 6.511, 6.3611 for the current fiscal year, now down to the proposed 6.2611. So a declining trend with respect to actual millage rate being experienced in the city of Delray Beach, which we felt it was important to underscore that particular metric. Next slide, please. This is simply a bar graph presentation that features the operating millage recommendation of 6.2611 combined with the debt outcome of 6.0337 to bring it to 6.2948. So a downward trend, reduction in the debt millage rate is also being recommended based on calculations on an econometrics basis. Next slide, please. It's also important to underscore ad valorem tax revenue projections over the past decade or so. So in the current fiscal year, that number is a little over $16 billion in terms of taxable value, $16,332,926,092. So change in taxable value of about 13.39%. Interestingly enough, for the upcoming fiscal year, the change in taxable value from the previous year is actually a little bit less than prior experience at about 10.86%. Property tax revenue anticipated to be collected is about $109 million in change. Next slide, please. I also thought it was important to underscore city charter requirements. The city of Delray Beach, we've been working over the past couple years to do what we can to demonstrate city charter compliancy. We've experienced some editorial commentary observations relative to compliancy in that regard. This presentation simply outlines what are the specific requirements to get to that place. Principal outcomes to that effect is that the Office of the City Manager must submit a proposed balanced budget by the first regular meeting in August. Again, we're working in advance in the month of July to provide an overview so that the City Commission can be given the opportunity to provide any ancillary direction that might be deemed appropriate in that regard. Budget document requirements, financial plan for upcoming year, which includes detailed estimates showing reasons for increases and decreases. That is outlined pretty clearly throughout the budget documentation. We've even taken the step of including such information online so that the public can have the benefit of knowing why those adjustments may have occurred in any given department or any operation. And of course, the budget adoption in accordance with state laws across the board. Interestingly enough, the charter requirement is something I began to take seriously upon my first year on board, beginning August 2021. Because again, reviewing and listening to some of the comments relative to compliancy, by 2022, myself, along with Chief Financial Officer Hugh Dunkley, collaborated with the Office of the City Attorney and the Office of the Internal Auditor to outline what practices and processes should be in place to demonstrate charter requirements in this regard. In essence, the ability to demonstrate estimates showing reasons for increases and decreases in any particular capacity or operation, etc. Next slide, please. Palm Beach County Office of the Inspector General was also engaged in this particular process. They have the opportunity to review the material as noted, and based on that experience, it was in fact found to be in compliance with the charter. Again, this exercise began in the summer, fall 2022 to begin the process of doing what we can, because admittedly, that had not been the case prior. So we did a more thorough job doing what we can to get to that place. And I will also advise both the commission and the public that that's a continuous process. So every year as we execute that requirement, we have opportunities to update and fine-tune it so that we can offer as much specificity as we possibly can to get to the best place possible. Next slide, please. General fund revenues. So we showcase a balanced budget for general fund revenues for the current fiscal year, $189,675,222. For the upcoming fiscal year, based on the millage rate recommendations, we're anticipating a change of about $1.8 million to bring that outcome to about $191,545,595, a change of 1%. So given where we are in this regard, ladies and gentlemen, it's really important to underscore that. General fund revenues encompassing primarily taxes, of course, fees and permits, intergovernmental funds, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, miscellaneous, transfer-ins, and other sources. So this provides an overview in terms of adjustments that are being experienced in this regard. But bottom line, general fund revenues are anticipated to only increase by about 1% from the current fiscal year. Next slide, please. Ancillary budget highlights, revenues. Estimated taxable of value properties increased from $16.3 billion to $18.1 billion. Increase in property tax revenue of $8.9 million from $100.5 million to $109.4 million. Property tax rate expected to decrease for the 12th straight year by 0.2 mils, in this case, or 1/10 of the previous year. Decrease in revenue from Highland Beach contract, as the city of Delray Beach concluded that relationship back in May. That's been factored in this regard. A couple other metrics we highlighted during the June 11, 2024 City Commission workshop presentation to this effect. Decrease in parking revenue of $2.1 million is what's being reported for the various reasons haven't been mentioned. And decrease in American Rescue Plan Act dollars of $2 million. So that's actually sunsetting across the board for many municipalities throughout the country, notably Delray Beach as well. A decrease in fines and forfeitures of $500,000 due to decrease in parking tickets and late fees, as well as a decrease in projected usage of fund balance reserves from $10.3 million to $8.3 million, a difference of about $2 million. So working to not be dependent on adjustments from fund balance so that we can achieve a solid recommendation in that regard. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the interest is to offer a balanced budget recommendation without the interest or contemplation of future adjustments in that regard, thus tight recommendations regarding the capital improvement program, which is the upcoming presentation. Next slide, please. General fund expenditures by category. The predominance, of course, as is the case in any municipality throughout the country, literally, personnel services. However, there's a change of about 8% in that regard. Operating expenditures, we're actually anticipated to have a decreased experience of about 3%. Capital outlay to be decreased by about 43%. Grants and aid, about an additional 8% outcome. Debt service to essentially go away altogether at 100% downward. Other uses down by 41%. So the aggregate total in terms of general fund expenditures to increase by the aforementioned 1% in terms of revenue and expenditure budget on both sides. Next slide, please. General funds by expenditures. General fund expenditures by department, City Commission, a slight increase of about 1.8%. Again, that's really the smallest operation of municipal operations at a little bit over $1 million. So very inconsequential. So for appropriate calculations, you're looking at an increase of about $9,500. The Office of the City Manager, budget reductions of about $272,000, or about 11.5%. The Department of Finance for calculations that are eccentric with respect to salaries, benefits, etc., 10.6%. Office of the City Attorney at about 5%. Office of the City Clerk, a decline of 1.3%. Information Technology, a decline of 1.4%. 2.2% for Human Resources. Communications, 8.9% upwards. Police, 2.2% based on calculations, etc. Fire Rescue, when also factoring the adjustment from the relationship of the town of Highland Beach, at about 9.7%. A decrease for Neighborhood and Community Services of about 5.8%. Slight increase in Development Services of 5.2%. Public Works to be reduced by 2.1%. And Parks, an uptick of about 4.3%. Subtotal expenditures at 4%, but non-departmental to be decreased by an additional 11%, thus the aggregate increase representing the full balance of about 1% overall in terms of expenditure increases. Next slide, please. Other highlights in this regard. Personnel services, salary and benefits increased from about $106.7 million to $114.8 million, which is about a 7.5% increase. Again, a function of various adjustments, calculations, staff elevating in their respective capacities, being able to continue their service with the City of Delray Beach. Service Employees International Union and the Police Benevolent Association, collective bargaining agreements underway. Increase in fire pension contributions of about $1.2 million. You've actually heard a little bit about this last month when we had the actuarial presentation offered from the outside. An adjustment on the police pension contributions of about $300,000. Increase in pension contributions for general employees of about $500,000. The agreement with the Downtown Development Authority for Old School Square, we talked a little bit about what that would look like in terms of their opportunity for a 90-10 net revenue split outcome and what the initial investments from the City of Delray Beach will be for the coming fiscal year. Decrease in transfers to General Capital Project Fund of about $7.3 million. Increases in transfers to the Beach Nourishment Fund of about $1.9 million. And an increase of $2.1 million in tax payment of tax increment revenues to the Community Redevelopment Agency. Next slide, please. Expenditure comparison over the past 10 years. So we've enjoyed some significant experiences in this regard. We talk a little bit about this to highlight and underscore the fact that municipal expenditure activity has exceeded over the past 10 years what ad valorem tax revenues had been. I offered a note to this effect via a recent information letter report to help underscore why we are where we are in that regard, because there had been some discussion or commentary that the City of Delray Beach can do more with respect to making adjustments in terms of operations, maintaining levels of service, doing what we can to be as responsive and attentive as we possibly can in the community. It needs to be recognized that municipal expenditures across the board significantly exceed the ad valorem tax revenues experienced in that regard. Thus, the need to do what we can to achieve expenditure, operational efficiencies, as well as other adjustments to do what we can to get to the best place possible. Bottom line, over that 10-year period, a change of about $87 million in terms of expenditure activity, whereas ad valorem revenues for that same period of time, a little bit less than $53 million. Very important metric, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to point that out to all concerned and interested. Next slide, please. General fund balance, the recommendation based on all calculations in this regard is to be at about $38.3 million. Government Finance Officers Association, we talked a little bit about this during the June 11th engagement, in which they have a recommended target, and after following up with that organization and clarifying what that should look like for an organization like the City of Delray Beach, the recommendations swing between 5% and 15%. Given that $38.3 million represents about a 20% outcome, I think we're doing pretty good in that regard. And again, given the interest to maintain commitments relative to capital improvements and other opportunities to achieve, we are incorporating that into the overall aggregate proposed budget to, again, not involve any dependency relative to further adjustments beyond that scope. Next slide, please. Financial condition heading into the upcoming fiscal year. Enterprise funds, water and sewer utilities, stormwater utilities, sanitation funds, city marina, municipal golf course, and Lakeview Golf Course. The City of Delray Beach, it's important to highlight that we have not one but two municipal golf courses. A lot of people tend to forget that. Enterprise funds operate like regular business enterprises. The financial goal for enterprise funds is to charge a user fee that will be sufficient to cover the cost of providing services. So separate and apart from the general fund, of which part of your operation does involve, or your responsibility does involve setting the millage rate. However, the City of Delray Beach is far more than just that, as I've updated everyone at the beginning of this presentation. Next slide, please. At a glance, Water and Sewer Fund, rate adjustment of 6.9% to be effective October 1. Projected monthly bill of $69.11 for the average customer based on 6,000 gallons of usage. New stormwater rate structure implemented in October 23 for stormwater, of course. Funding various capital projects, grant matches. Sanitation Fund, rate adjustment being contemplated at 3.55% effective October 1. Curbside collection, residential single family, an average of about $19.13 a month, given the arrangement that was approved by the City Commission in early 2023 with Waste Management Incorporated. Municipal Lakeview golf courses, overdue renovation, repairs. We have discussions and direction currently underway to get to that place. One of the opportunities you will be considering as part of this evening's regular meeting involves the construction of the Mausoleum Project, which is a hallmark feature of municipal operations at a cemetery. Next slide, please. Garage Fund, continuation of fleet replacement program via lease purchase where applicable. Again, not your typical lease environment, but a lease purchase in which the city of Delray Beach will ultimately own vehicles and equipment to be purchased via this approach. Increase in vehicle rental charges to user departments. In other words, the budget does contemplate appropriate adjustments to be executed for maintaining and executing a robust and financially solvent fleet fund. Insurance fund, total expense allocated to city user departments, increase of about 7% in total funds from about $26.1 million to $26.8 million. Not a tremendous swing, but again, a function of the marketplace in general, and that is being contemplated and incorporated in overall recommendations as well. Next slide, please. Additionally, special revenue funds. This encompasses Law Enforcement Trust Fund, Special Projects Fund, Recreation Impact Fee Fund, Neighborhood Services Fund, Beautification Trust Fund, Local Option Gas Tax Fund, 1 to 5 cents, Local Option Gas Tax Fund, 1 to 6 cents, Building Permit Fund, not to mention debt service funds based on a general obligation bond fund having been approved by the voters back in March 2023, and of course the Utility Tax Debt Service Fund. Next slide, please. The next steps in the proposed budget process, of course, we're providing the overview today, July 9th. However, last week, the City of Delray Beach experienced this update from the Palm Beach County Property Appraiser to certify taxable values to municipalities. Early in the presentation, we were able to highlight and underscore what that's looked like for the City of Delray Beach. We're approaching a slightly higher value total assessed valuation for the City of Delray Beach at about $18 billion, a little bit up from $16 billion in change. That became available as of last week, so right before the Independence Day holiday, thus we were able to incorporate that into this presentation. As we began the practice of quarterly town hall engagements, the focus for the next exercise to this effect will take place Thursday, July 25th, in which we will highlight and present to those in attendance and make opportunities for streaming a sensible understanding as to why we are where we are with respect to budget priorities and what the focus will be moving forward. Later this month, the Florida Department of Revenue is anticipated to provide estimates for state shared revenue sources. We come up with some conservative estimates in this regard as in an effort to present an initial proposed budget recommendation. However, that may tweak slightly higher, but we do what we can to be conservative in that realm. However, will it make a difference in terms of tremendous swings overall with respect to budget recommendations? Probably not. However, we do work with them to get to the place in which we can make that arrangement happen. The principal activity for the month of August is to submit the tentative millage rate and non-ad valorem information to the property appraiser. This will take place in the month of August based on what we anticipate experiencing beginning this evening as well as next week. Public hearing to be held to adopt the millage and budget during the month of September. And of course, the new fiscal year begins October 1, 2024. Next slide, please. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we are. Likewise, we do have a capital improvement program presentation, which is a tremendous function of the proposed budget process. The capital improvement program, although it's presented every year, it does provide a 5-year projection as to what commitments are anticipated and what highlights should be considered moving forward. However, before we offer that opportunity, I would like to have both myself and Mr. Dunkley and others, department directors who are in attendance, I've asked them all to be with us this afternoon to be available for any specific questions or observations that you may have at this time.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of observations on the capital improvement budget, and I know that the other commissioners do as well. I mean, I've got a lot of notes, all right? And I don't know how many notes that anybody has, but I think we would like to, before we, I mean, we spent more time on this than I wanted to spend because I wanted to get right into dealing with the numbers because I'm not very happy with the way everything has been presented. I'm not very happy with what I see as a lot of holes in the various budget numbers. I'm not very happy with all the number of to be determined that we have here. I'm not happy with the fact that the justifications are only half of the stuff really have any real meaningful justifications. So I don't care how we start, but I want to give each, I was going to offer 10 minutes to each one. I was going to offer 15. I don't know if I can get away with that yet, maybe. Offer 10 minutes to each commissioner to just kind of go through all their notes without expecting any response. This is time for you all to take notes because I'm fully expecting that this capital improvement budget is going to come back to us because I'm not going to, this is not in a forum for, there's just too many holes in it for me to try to even suggest that I would approve what's in this thing. So would you like to go first?
You can start on the other end.
All right, well I have so many notes, it's
No, I was saying, why don't you let the gentleman start and then I'll follow. I'll go. If nobody's going, I'll go. It's fine. Okay, I have a bunch of questions. On the slide where you talk about the increases, you've got only 2.2% for the police. We've recently hired considerable amount of individuals, plus you have their normal 5% step up annually. How is that possible? Did you make reductions in light of the consideration for the negotiations upcoming with the understanding that we'd be incorporating additional funds later? How did you get to 2.2%, which seems lower than what one would expect for the police department?
Yes, ma'am.
We've taken like 6, it looks like I have it, I think it's page 93, and now I'm on a time frame, so I want to be getting my questions in. But I believe it's page 93, and we've taken out approximately, what's the amount? $6 million. The department puts in $56 million of necessity. You dropped it down to $50 million. That's a substantial change, and I'm just curious.
That $56 million represented the initial request on part of police leadership.
Right.
And of course, we were able to identify various efficiencies.
And we asked you to, so I do appreciate
ma'am.
it. It just seems, it seems substantial, and it seems when you're talking about 2.2% increase, it doesn't even seem doable in light of the fact that there are benefit enhancements that they're going to automatically receive in their current contract and in the next contract up. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, forget it.
No, please.
No, I just want to understand, did you get to that number because you know we're going to have additional charges to that that portion of the general fund, the police department, in the near future because we're negotiating?
Mr. Dunkley, if you would, please.
I thought you wanted to talk
Yes.
about capital improvements.
We're not talking about this. I didn't know we were doing I thought.
Well, I thought we were doing capital improvements because when the budget first came out, it was a discussion of the capital improvements.
I was
So-
just going on what's up on the screen.
Because, I mean, this is a meeting in and of itself.
I couldn't agree with you more. But
And meanwhile, I've got pages of comments on capital improvements.
listen, my whole capital improvement binder is just like yours. I have questions too. I will do this however everybody wants to do it. You just have to tell me I'm following the slideshow presentation and asking questions based on what was
May
presented.
I offer a recommendation, please?
Because we're all starting in the wrong premise, at least for me, okay? I want to freeze the taxes where they were last year. We had 35% tax increases on the people of Delray Beach in the last 5 years. And I think enough is enough. And so all of these numbers coming in and saying this, that, and the other thing, give 1% off the millage is not going to work for me. Now, I want to go to really 5, I want my millage to be essentially 5.8641.
Okay.
I want it to go back to the rate that we collected last year.
What does
There's-
that put our expenses, our operating costs
That's a
at?
budget issue. He's got to figure out how to he's
No,
gotta figure.
I'm just asking you. Do we have that calculation? I can try and do it. But.
I have, yes, I mean, the calculations have been done. I
Listen,
know
you
that-
know I want to support you. I'm just
I'm just
curious,
saying
what is that?
that the taxpayers of the city, they're going to have 20 to 25% increases in their insurance.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be another 10 to 15% increase in auto insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And the city has enjoyed great success here with tax rates over the last bunch of years.
Mm.
And it's time that we at least give the taxpayers at least 1 year off. So I am of the view that we need to be cutting, real cutting
Right.
of things, and you know, we've grown, our services have grown, everything has grown, and everyone can say, yes, I want. The problem with this budget is there's an awful lot of wish list items in this budget, which are great things to have, but we need to be taking care of the
You're talking about your CIP.
I'm
right
talking
now.
about, well, the CIP and all the budgets.
Well-
So there's a lot of, in my view, fluff.
I want to go where you're going. Okay. And I say that to you very honestly. And I hope we can get there. And I support you in that. But I went item by item. I was emailing Mr. Dunkley, Mr. Moore over the weekend. I am concerned about how much flexibility there truly is. And if you're going to give him that direction to go that way, I support you, Mayor. But this means we need them to take this back immediately and come back to us in fast turnaround.
Exactly.
And show
We'll be
us how
back.
this is going
Exactly.
to happen. But I will caution everybody, when you start looking at our funds, I get very tense. Mr. Dunkley, you and I appreciate your time, went through this. Something came across my view. There was an interdepartmental transfer, and I was trying to look at it. It wasn't this current year, but it was impactful to me in a sense, because I was trying to understand why we were taking money out of a water fund for insurance when we weren't in a year when we were looking at
I have
insurance.
a lot of those comments about which
Right.
funds are being used for
More
different
important, what I think is concerning, and if I may say this, when we had that rate presentation, we had an anticipation of a certain amount of money coming in that we were then going to be utilizing for the water treatment plant. I have serious concerns. When you look at the income statement, I asked for it, and I think you got a copy of the funds, and Mr. Dunkley and I were just talking about the closeout in the water fund.
Talking about the enterprise funds.
Yes,
I
that's
have those.
correct. We are not on target for the water treatment plant, as far as I'm concerned, in light of the fact that there's been a great increase in the amount of money it's going to cost. I just say that the two biggest concerns I have is that fund and the insurance fund, which concerns me a lot, because while we're on the subject, and I'm still in my 10, I don't know how you want to proceed, but if you look at the insurance fund, it's in the very back of the book. There's the question that I have that's sort of interesting. It looks like the last year's budget was revenue total was $349 million and expenses $349. But then there's a department entry for $334, and then you have city manager at $388. So we are anticipating, it looks like, a loss of $9 million based on this last page of our report, page 414. And I'm concerned. When you look at page 265, the department entry for water sewer, if you go to page 265, Mayor, of the book for one moment, and just entertain
Yeah,
me.
I have a separate copy, but that's fine.
I'm sorry. Shall I?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So page 265, if you will.
That's the other fund.
Do you have it?
Yeah, I have it. It's
Okay, if you look at the department entry for 36 water and sewer, for 2024, the budget was $40 million. For 2025, the department entry is $34.3 million. And then the city manager's entry is $43 million, which is a $9 million increase. So I'm just trying to understand if the department is thinking the revenues are 34 million, why are you saying they are 43, and what accounts for the $9 million difference in that fund? And this isn't an answer you have to have today for me. We can discuss this privately if you like, but my biggest concern, Mayor, is that I want to go with you on this and I support you, but I want to make sure that we are on target and on task for the water treatment plant.
I believe we are, and if I may, ladies and gentlemen, to offer a recommendation. Part of the capital improvement program presentation does highlight that a bit. I think it would be helpful to hear in that regard.
So is that $9 million a capital outlay, do you think?
That was an adjustment we made based on final calculations. So when the department made their initial submission, it was based on 34, but working with the Department of Finance, the Department of Utilities, and everybody coming up with all final calculations, that's the calculation. Mr. Dunkley, if you can fill in the blanks to that effect. I'd like to, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to address that specific question so that we can offer clarity and we achieve in that regard. Not to mention the capital improvement program piece so that we can eloquently address some of the specific concerns so that we can come back with the adjustments based on you all's direction.
Fine.
Thank you. Mr. Dunkley, please, if you can address Vice Mayor's inquiry relative to the $9 million swing, I think that would be helpful.
Swing?
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Some expenditures.
I don't know if your mic is on, actually.
Are you able to hear me?
A little better, thank you.
Okay. I guess the height advantage or disadvantage. However, so basically, the departments are not in the know. Whenever they present their initial budgets, they're required to project operating expenditures. There's some expenditures that are outside of their control,
Okay.
which you mentioned a few operating expenditures, non-operating administrative fees to the general fund,
Right.
debt service,
Right.
things of that nature. The departments will not know.
Okay.
Finance will calculate those funds and make an entry into the city manager proposed budget. If you look at the city manager column, every single fund is balanced.
Right.
If you want to know why there is a change from X to Y, each line item, and forgive me, if I'd known that this was a concern of yours, I would have definitely had the definitive
No, it's
reply.
okay. We can
However,
catch.
so in the city manager column, we call them budget levels.
Right.
The budget level that the manager is presenting his budget in this book is
Balanced.
entitled City Manager Recommendation, the city
Right.
manager column.
Yep.
Every single fund is balanced.
Right.
If you have questions on the items of revenues or expenditures, we're more than pleased to respond to each particular question.
Okay, so maybe what you can do is get back to me with the question about the
Precisely. I will
$9 million
definitely.
loss in the insurance fund on page
Yes.
414.
We'll do.
Because I don't know how we're covering that for, and you know, we see across the board insurance is going up. In some departments, it's 35%, but have we negotiated that rate yet?
For the upcoming fiscal year, we will
Correct.
be finalizing those negotiations in the coming weeks
So
to
that could
anticipate.
go up or down.
That can, we recently met with the benefits broker to get to that place, and we're hopeful to do what we can, but for purposes of conservative budgeting, the numbers are presently positioned as they are. So we are hopeful that we'll have a better experience as a result.
Okay, and then in the cover part of the booklet, you talk about the reserves at 20%. You say fund balance reserves above the 20% target. 25%, I believe, is our target, actually, right?
That informally had been the case. We've been working in that regard, and much of that is a function of commitments for the capital improvement program.
Right.
Again, we reevaluated that to achieve a balanced budget recommendation to offer the ability for an downward adjustment in the millage rate, but again, the capital improvement program, and I would like to ask that you all give staff a few minutes to offer that presentation so that you all can achieve clarity in that regard. Much of this is a function of a lot of work that's underway. There are a lot of expectations, a lot of work that needs to be achieved in that regard. So working closely with the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, between 5% and 15%, this balanced budget recommendation does contemplate 20. Had it been 25% once upon a time? Yes, it has been. As recently as the current fiscal year, that was the target. Nevertheless, given the significance relative to capital projects and the various goals and objectives identified by the City of Delray Beach, as well as an interest in offering a reduced millage rate for all concerned, of course, that was the outcome. That was the calculation.
Okay. Can we get a list of those grants that are listed in this book that are 20 some odd million, I think?
Yes, ma'am. And that's a good analysis, Vice Mayor, simply because you all should have that background. So Mr. Dunkley, myself, members of the Department of Finance will be able to provide all the commissioners with an email summary to that effect in the next day or so.
Okay.
We'll give us that opportunity. We'll make
Just
arrangements.
Super quick, the decrease in the parking, is that because we didn't opt to monetize some of the parking in the city?
That will be part of the capital improvement program presentation coming from Ms. Barletto. She'll be able to underscore specifics to that effect as part of her highlights. I'll need her assistance in that regard.
Okay.
But it's for a couple different reasons. One of them has to do with what you just talked about.
Right. And just to say, you have decrease in the ARPA revenue. Really, that was always a bonus. That was never a decrease. We were lucky to get that.
Well,
So,
since COVID, it has been factored in terms of additional revenue from the federal government coming in. So
Right.
for the past 4 fiscal years, it had been a calculation. Therefore, we have to highlight and underscore the presence thereof. The fact that it is going away, we are taking that into consideration to achieve across the board. So it is in place, but next year's budget exercise, there won't be any attention or focus to that effect for the reasons you've just highlighted.
okay. I have a bunch of tabs, but what I think I'll do is I'll type out a list and send them on to you and Mr. Dunkley. And then I would like to address in the future the insurance fund and the water sewer fund. And I will give up my time. The only other thing is I did write to Mr. Moore because I was struggling to find information on some of these items over the weekend. I do believe when we're seeing a large increase, decrease, there should be some note letting us know the reason so that we don't have to be texting and emailing.
And
you
if I
guys
may,
on the
Vice
weekend.
Mayor and ladies and gentlemen, my little commentary relative to charter compliancy relates to exactly that. So working with the Department of Finance and all other team members, we will continue to elevate that practice to achieve full commentary or information to that effect. So we're all in alignment in that regard, Vice Mayor.
Okay.
So we'll be able to
And
proceed.
if I could ask one other thing, Mayor, when in the future, at least while I'm sitting up here, and I'm pretty sure the mayor will agree, if there is going to be a transfer out of one of those funds, a substantial amount, and we should be, some of those are stuck in the budget as a budget item, and they might get missed when you're looking at it line by line. That's something we should really know about and discuss. And also, I think I should be able to contact a department head and say, what's this? And they should know. So department head approval on large transfers out of funds should always be probably something that you're doing as practice, I'm sure. And us knowing would be important too.
That will be part of our financial management practice. That commitment has already been previously made.
Okay.
Given the commentary. And again, I would encourage the elected officials working closely with the Office of the City Manager per noted requirements, and the respective departmental cooperation will exist because that is an expectation of part of the Office of the City Manager.
Thank you for the 10 minutes or whatever it was. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Because my only point is, there's a lot of, when I go through this capital improvement budget, I'm going to go back through this, like special project fund, the revenue source to be determined, various upgrade to various parks. Parks aren't listed. I mean, the whole thing. You have the Mike Machak Park. For heaven's sakes, that wall isn't even on city property, and we want to go fix it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, sir, I think the capital improvement program presentation will be extremely beneficial and productive so that
it'd
we
be a
can
great
address
proposal,
those
but we won't have
specifics.
that's fine, but we won't have any time to comment on anything.
We will have an opportunity next week as well to receive direction this evening to make adjustments and to be able to go from there. So I really think it would be helpful, Mr. Mayor. I wish to therefore encourage the commission to allow us a few additional minutes to facilitate the capital improvement program presentation at this time.
Okay.
From there, we will have a productive engagement in terms
Okay.
of direction, and again, productive for all as a result. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin with Director of Public Works, Missy Barletto, to please come forward to highlight and underscore some specific considerations, to likewise be as succinct as possible despite the commentary associated therein. She is also accompanied by Director of Parks and Recreation, Sam Mitat, along with Director of Utilities, Hassan Hajimiri. And again, some of the commentary you've all offered thus far will assist their presentation in terms of responding to any concerns or thoughts that you all may have shared thus far. And again, ladies and gentlemen, as succinct as possible, because I'm really anxious to receive some concrete direction so that we can be timely next week and offer an update and finalize recommendations accordingly.
It's hard when you get your documents on Wednesday to sit and go through all of the things to come back with full briefing papers by essentially, they have to be finished last night.
Well, this is a workshop session. It's not a hard and fast
Well,
regular
it is,
meeting
but
adoption.
we're expected to we're expected next week to statutorily confirm a millage rate. So
Yes, sir.
again, since that's part and parcel with what the numbers are in the budget,
Yes, sir.
it makes it a difficult task to try to get it right.
Don't mean to be difficult, sir, but much appreciated.
Okay.
Ms. Barletto, if you would, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. We'd like to run you through very quickly what is included in the capital improvement budget, given the parameters that were explained to you in the previous presentation as far as available revenues that were given to us.
Waving the magic wand and it's not working
They
for
tell
you there?
me they tell me when I come up here if I shake it, it'll work. So I tried that. That's the big one. That's the one I was pushing. Was I pushing the wrong one? I had it upside down. Huh. User error. This is going really well already. So I would like to say that the total CIP funding for this coming year is significantly up over prior year at $250 million, just under $251 million. That increase in revenue is represented by a number of things, including grants that have been won by the city, as well as some input into the CIP from revenue bonds and state revolving loan applications. So if we take a look at this, the largest amount of dollars are spent out of the water and sewer department for the water treatment plant, and public works for various infrastructure projects.
Can I ask you just a quick question on that? So,
Sure.
So that $45 million for the water treatment plant, that's the all-in cost regardless of how long the project takes?
That is not the
So
all-in
that's this
cost.
portion. For
Okay,
this year.
just this year.
Hassan, do you want to take that?
It's going to be 300.
300?
That was intentional. Good afternoon. Yes, it's it is afternoon. It is only for fiscal year 2025.
Okay,
And then we have the cost also when we get to future slide. It shows the allocation for the upcoming years.
okay.
Again, for the water treatment plant, maybe it's too early for me to say, we still don't have the final, since it's a progressive design build, we
Yep.
will have the GMP by sometimes next year,
Okay.
early next year. So we have a much better idea
Okay.
of what the cost is going to be.
Yeah, at some point, I just would like to see what the all-in cost looks like. If the project takes 5 years, what are we voting on?
Sure, I can address it now, or I can address it when I get to my slide.
We can do it when you get to it. It's good.
Yes,
I just had a
thank you.
question. Thank you.
Okay. The CIP budget, as it's divided by department, the Public Works Department is working on stormwater utility, infrastructure projects, the new police department building. So that big part in blue is for the Public Works Department, and the green is for the Utilities Department. Most of the other departments are kind of equally divided up. So highlights in this year's CIP budget, we will be continuing the tree planting program, continuous improvements of parks, pavilions, and playgrounds, Andrews Avenue safety improvements.
Can I ask you a question on Andrews Avenue safety improvement?
Yes.
In your materials, you say that that's what the neighborhood wanted, and et cetera, et cetera. BPOA said they'd never heard of it, so they didn't know who was canvassed. So who are the ones that you put here are the neighbors that were all in support of it? Because the ones that I've spoken to, it's my old neighborhood, didn't know anything about it.
Members of the neighborhood actually came to commission. Former Mayor Glickstein was the spokesman for this project.
Okay.
Came to commission and asked that this project be included in the CIP, and commission directed us to include it.
Okay. Because it's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money for a very short amount of distance, but
Yep.
there within that corridor there are a lot of driveway entrances.
Yes,
There's
I know.
a lot of things that have to be negotiated within that, and we're just now in design, so that's an estimate, not a final number.
Well, that's another issue that we can talk about, because I'm looking at all the money we're spending on design and preliminary studies. We've got millions of dollars tied up in design and preliminary, which seems to be, everything seems to be either 300,000 or 500,000. There's a couple of them were 100, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. The building division reconfiguration, which will provide suitable working space within City Hall for the building division and several other areas. Next year, we're looking at the Corps of Engineers coming in and doing a storm repair on our beach that they are willing to allow the city to extend into a full beach renourishment, which was originally scheduled for 2023, and the Corps moved that out to 2029. So we will be shaving some time off of that and getting the beach renourishment done earlier. It is a significant expense. Our accounting software that the city uses, the Tyler New World, we've been notified that it is near end of life. It won't be supported anymore and needs to be replaced. That is in this budget. We will complete Fire Station 113 and be moving into that. The North Swinton roadway and utility improvements is included in there for some of the design. Pompey Park construction, Northwest neighborhood improvements. Construction will begin this coming year. Renovation of the Crest Theater Auditorium, the new police department headquarters, a new water treatment plant, the Thomas Street pump station rebuild, Marine Way, seawall, roadway, and drainage improvements will be coming in the next year, and vehicle and equipment replacements are also included in this version of the CIP. So to start off, we wanted to go kind of fund by fund with you. We'll do this very quickly. I wanted to point out that the to be determined lines that you have a problem with. When we do a capital improvement budget in this city, we only budget for 1 year at a time. So we try to estimate what those future year expenses will look like so that you have an idea of what's coming in the following year. If you approve this project, then these are the dollars that we're going to need in future years. And that's why it says to be determined on the funding source.
But like on this one, we're talking about revenue. What's the source of the revenue, the $273,000?
In this, the Special Projects Fund has a number of different revenues. A lot of these are the in lieu funds.
Right.
The one that we use for the tree planting program is specifically the tree fund. When development happens and they have to pay in because they're removing
trees
That's fine,
that
I
they.
just think it should be articulate. I'm not suggesting there's no way for me to ever figure out where your revenues are coming from. That's my point on that, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. So recreation impact fee, I'm going to let Sam address that.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Sam Eatow, Parks and Recreation Director. Just to kind of start where we just left off from the last one, recreation impact fee is a fund. The revenue source is essentially the short version is the development, all the individual units and new development get charged a recreation impact fee for the impact that those new residents will have on services, right? So whether it's for different departments, but for the recreation side, it all goes into a recreation impact fee that we are able to utilize to either renovate a park or provide new park surfaces or playgrounds for those new residents and those new people being impacted. So that's the recreation impact fee. To Missy's point, that's where you see the future revenue sources to be determined. And then below that you see what we're looking at, some of the projects here in the current year and then the future years. Did you want me to go down through them? Park pavilion replacement. We have about 30 pavilions throughout the park system. Every park has different numbers. Some have a lot, some don't. So that's where you'll see like various parks, not to get into the individual weeds of Pavilion 6 at Orchard View and so on. So we've tried to do that little bit by little bit, year by year. Each pavilion costs approximately $30,000 to $50,000 depending on the size. And we kind of go through triage, right? Whatever ones are in the oldest, worst case conditions, those are the ones we're looking to replace one by one. We've been pretty successful. I think we're up to about 6 or 7 of those that we've replaced through the program. Playground updates. Again, that's an annual thing we try to include there to account for all the playground wear and tear, new parts that are expensive. We have, again, almost 30 playgrounds throughout the city, so that covers replacement parts or things that are damaged through use, things like that. Pine Grove Playground. We are looking to upgrade the playground over at Pine Grove Park. Their playground is literally nothing but a set of monkey bars and a small swing. So we're looking to do a new playground over at Pine Grove Park. We've looked at a restroom trailer, Leon Weeks restoration. That's more of the environmental restoration at Leon Weeks. You mentioned earlier the Maycheck Wall. That's members of the community have asked for us to address that wall.
The wall is not on our property. The wall, the homeowners association that we're on whose property the wall is, has an obligation to maintain the wall. Why isn't the city, via the city's attorney's office, writing a letter demanding that they fulfill their obligations and they pay for the wall? Why are we paying for it? Because the residents think it's a nice idea? I mean, there's a wall behind my house that came over and paid me to be a real nice idea too.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not even on our property. And
Agreed.
the people that own the wall have an affirmative obligation to maintain it.
Yeah. And that's a place where I was hoping to provide a little more clarity here for you. What we're looking to do is actually create a hedge and an entire line there to kind of hide that wall and do so in a very nice and neat fashion that kind of eliminates that, whatever the right word is there, unfortunate look of the decaying wall, and create a new hedge line and the equipment and stuff that's needed for that.
Again, they had an affirmative obligation to maintain the wall. And if it's decaying, then code enforcement should be going over there and saying, you have an affirmative obligation to maintain the wall.
That is part of the mix. So the thinking here, if I may interject, the hedge environment you speak of would be in a right-of-way area, and
It would be on the park side.
on the park side, that's what I'm getting at. So it's a park improvement feature is what we're describing, just to be clear, to help the city commission in that regard. So it's not to directly benefit the wall per se, but it was a park improvement feature having been contemplated in that regard. So that is what is being contemplated in this regard. So perhaps
It says replacement of walls, so I said, in a lot of this thing, the project description and justifications are just not accurate.
And Mr. Mayor, on that note, you are correct. I'd like to support that we be clear in terms of the project descriptions, because again, this is the initial series of dialogue, recommendations, discussions, and to be clear, I do support Mayor Carney in that the description of that project should be better aligned.
Fair.
Okay, Fund 120 is the state revenue sharing of the local option 5-cent gas tax. We generally bring in about $400,000 a year from this venue, and we spend that annually on Americans with Disability Act transition plan improvements, which is directed at improved mobility for pedestrians. So, in short, we generally spend this on sidewalk projects. In the building fund, this is the fund that we'll be utilizing to do the building department reconfiguration, which is going to result in a great deal of construction at City Hall, on the north end of City Hall, and also in some portions of the community center. You're welcome.
I mean, at 13,000 square feet, which is what that is, it's coming out to $450 a square foot that's your number. Even at, and I do a lot of construction, so even at the average beachfront type of construction, it's not $450 a square foot. So why is this so high?
Well, in most of our current construction efforts, it's around $650 a square foot. So, and this is a renovation project. So there's a good deal of rewiring and a lot of other things that are going to happen as a result of this.
Okay.
And this is just money that we've set aside for this. There is no cost estimate. There's no design done yet for it. It's an estimate.
I'm just looking at, $5.9 million this year that could it be used for something better?
This money is specifically, and Anthea, if you want to address it, but this money is specifically required
In the building
to
fund.
support the building department or the implementation of Florida Building Code, because it's derived from building permit applications.
Yeah. And we have a substantial, we're looking at trying to find ways to spend that money, I think, because we have quite a bit of it, right?
Yes, and if we don't spend it, we have to return it.
Exactly.
But again, within your project justification, it might have been useful to say that it has to be bringing it up to bringing it up to code and bringing it up to
Right.
this and complying with the Florida Building Code. That
Yep.
would have been a useful thing to have known when I'm looking at as an expenditure.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Because otherwise, it's just kind of a word salad to me, and I don't know what it means. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue.
It's okay. All right, for beach restoration, we have a number of different inputs into the beach restoration fund. We have state grants. A lot of this is speculative based on our contracts and agreements that we have in place, because we have not started the beach renourishment project yet. But these are our expectations of incoming revenues. About $9.5 million from state grants. The Palm Beach County cost share would be just under $4 million. And then we would also be including some transfers in from the general fund.
Yeah, about $1.8 million. That's what I've got from the general fund on page 211 here. Right? Transfer from general fund is going to be $1,877,000, which is fine. I just like to see other things.
Okay. So, with that revenue, we will be able to complete a full beach renourishment program, as well as all of the additional things that are required as a result of doing the beach renourishment permitting, which includes sea turtle nest monitoring, dune management, as well as some of our additional programs that we keep alive on the beach, the Blue Flag Award Program, and annual repair and maintenance.
So the total on that is $19 million, and the grant money we're getting is $13 million.
Yeah, we're in
Yes,
for about
ma'am.
5. It's good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
And-
Plus, if we go over, there's a 50-50 split with the state, right? Is that what it is? It's 50-50 split?
If we go over that cost, you're saying there?
Yeah, there's another.
So the
Missy, how much
the
risk
way
do-
that a normal beach renourishment would work is that the federal government covers 50% of the
Right.
cost. The state covers
Here we're getting substantially more.
28%, and then the county and the city split the remainder. The county is looking at redoing our interlocal agreement with this and lowering their amount for construction, but picking up an annual cost share for other items like sea turtle monitoring, dune management, and some of the other things that we do. So while they might reduce what they contribute from maybe 26% to 20% on construction costs, which is all they're obligated to share with us now, they would be picking up more of the annual cost share on some of the other support activities that we do on the beach. 100% of the county's income for this activity comes from bed taxes from hotels, which we get none of unless they share.
Right. Thank you so much.
So is there a tremendous amount of risk with the grant money?
No.
I mean, I know it's always a guess.
No,
but
we have contracts in place, and there's not a tremendous amount of risk.
Okay.
The beach fund is annually fully funded by the
Okay.
legislature. It does not get vetoed by the governor, so it's relatively safe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so general construction, this is one of the major categories. This first sheet just lists the revenues that are associated with the projects that are included in the general construction fund. Everything that you see on this list that is marked CRA in front of it is 100% funded by the Community Redevelopment Agency. All of the things that you see marked TPA, those are cost shares with the Palm Beach County Transportation Planning Authority. FED is a federal appropriation from the federal government. FLA is a state appropriation from the state legislature. And then the others are some incoming revenues that have not been billed yet from this year that will be available for expense next year, and an item for lease purchase of the ERP system through a Florida League of Cities lease purchase program that's available to us.
Thank you.
And then these are the expenses that are also associated with the general construction fund: Pompey Park, Northwest Neighborhood Improvements, Artist Alley drainage improvements, Crest Theater Auditorium, Lindell Boulevard bike and pedestrian improvements, which is already under construction, Brant Bridge connector project, which is completing design that connects where the Brant Bridge that was recently constructed with sidewalks. It connects it to the Lindell Boulevard project that's under construction now. Barwick Road from Atlantic Avenue to Lake Ida Road is under construction now, and Germantown Road improvements, which we are getting ready to award the construction bid for that. The state appropriated $306,000 this year for a fire blocking unit to assist the firefighters when they're doing traffic control on major roadways to keep people from crashing into our fire trucks, which happens on a regular basis.
Really?
And then
I thought the same.
and then there's a necessary purchase for an IT data center UPS units to protect our network system from power outages. And then you also will see on here the Lowson Boulevard railroad crossing is actually the final element of the Lowson Boulevard project that's just wrapping up. The South Florida Regional Transportation Authority wants to be the ones to do the project across the Tri-Rail track and underneath the I-95 overpass. because there's a pedestrian cross arm that has to be installed, and there's $750,000 allowed for that. As you will see for golf course renovation, there's no dollars being asked for in this year's budget for construction. We will begin construction on that in FY25 and 25-26. So infrastructure surtax, this is the 1 penny sales tax. This is winding up in the very near future. We generally get about $6 million in revenue for that each year, of which $3.5 million goes to debt service. So there's not a lot left in this fund left over for us to spend on other things. We will be completing Fire Station 113 out of this fund. As you can see, we're offsetting those costs with a 2015 bond proceeds from a revenue bond that was done in 2015. So we are balancing some of the expenses with that. In this fund, in the coming year, we have budgeted the North Swinton roadway and utility improvements, the Swinton and Atlantic Avenue infrastructure improvements, the Main Beach Pavilion. If you've been out there to take a look at it recently, there's a lot of rust on some of the members that provide stability for the structure, and we're going to need to do some disassembly of the Main Beach Pavilion and replace some of those steel structures with it was constructed with regular building materials and not 316 stainless steel that resists rust. So we'll be replacing it with the higher quality materials to provide a longer lifespan for that. So this one's you again, Sam.
All right. Hello again. This is the Parks Geo bond. We've talked a lot about the bonds. There shouldn't be too many surprises in there. This is $6.3 million, but it entails the things that we talked about moving forward with, like new sod at Merritt or the lighting, etc. Those are the initial projects in the bond. Anything, we talked about it before. There's none of the covers will be included in that, and then some of the bigger projects down the road, such as Catherine Strong renovations. In the future years, we wouldn't be able to get to that in this first current year. Of course, that's all the funding and revenue through the bond.
The public safety bond are big ticket items for public safety. We are doing some improvements at the Ocean Rescue facility on A1A. They have some significant issues with rust and deterioration in that facility, and then the major thing is beginning the design for our new police headquarters.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. This year we have divided the CIP for utilities into two different accounts, 442 and 443. 442 is mainly for the water distribution and wastewater collection. The revenue source for that is utilities enterprise fund from reserve. For the distribution and collection is almost $26 million from the reserve, and $3,300,000 that is expected funding that we will be receiving from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Thanks to Missy, she volunteered to do that, and I really appreciate that. So, as far as the detail for the water and sewer, few of these were already initiated many years ago as part of the work in that area, are being managed by Public Works, such as Tropic Isle Neighborhood, Historic Marine Way, Seawall, and Swinton Avenue roadway. So those the costs associated with those are for the underground utilities that requires improvement. The rest of them are improvement mainly to the treatment plant itself, and our distribution system. If you would like, I can go one by one and in detail and tell you what they are, or I can pick up some major items. The existing treatment plant is old, and we all know that. So we're still going to operate that treatment facility for at least another 3 to 4 years. So we have to maintain it. As a result, we have to make sure that we can operate it properly also, and much better than what it has been. So we are spending money on instrumentation, on control for the treatment facilities, replacing some outdated chemical storage tanks that they are there, and they have reached the end of their useful life. We are hoping that this year expand our reclaimed water to cemetery, to utilize some of the reclaimed water in that area. Basically, within the city itself, there is no major users for reclaimed water, and the golf courses are, a couple of them disappeared, as we know, and the lots staying the same size, but the buildings are getting much bigger on those parcels. So the green space are very, very limited and small. So we have to look for somewhere that it is really worth it for us to spend a couple $1 million to take the reclaimed water there. At least we can utilize some. It is not really cost effective to go to the residential area, spend millions and millions, and only get rid of 10,000 gallons a day of reclaimed water. So that's one project that I have included there. Our laboratory, by instrumentation for our laboratory, some safety items for our lift stations, or wastewater lift station, that they all need to have a fence. We need to replace the fence. The covers for those, they're not safe. We're replacing all the hatch covers for the employee safety. So again, if there is any specific one, I'll be more than happy to give you a detailed description on those. For our water treatment plant is 443. And for that, we have $9 million we bring in from the reserve account, and we are hoping that this year we will start the process for revenue bond, or that will be hopefully starting early next year to fund the first year of that treatment facilities design cost, and maybe some of the construction. We also, at the same time, as you are well aware, we are applying for the state revolving fund for the design fee, which is $15 million, plus the cost of the 2 deep injection well at $32 million. So we are asking for those funding from state of Florida. But again, as I mentioned—
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last line about the funding from the state of Florida?
Yes, it's a state revolving funds
Right.
that they're available for the planning and also for the design of the facilities. For the construction itself, no, it has to be designed, bid, and built.
Right.
And we have progressive design build projects, so it doesn't fall in that category. However, we are going to pursue that avenue to see which way is most cost beneficial. On a meeting with the city manager this morning, we discussed that. And so hopefully, if it becomes more beneficial to the city to choose another avenue, then we will do that, understanding that we also have to meet the deadline for our regulatory
Right.
compliance with the EPA for the PFAS.
In the state revolving fund, but it's a great fund, but they're not always the cheap. Have you explored cheaper borrowing than from the state revolving fund? Because there's
Yes.
cheaper money out there.
State revolving fund is—
It's not as, it's easy to get. The process is a
Correct.
lot easier using their funds.
We are applying that for the two very clean projects.
Yeah.
One of them is the design fee for the CDM, which we already have the contract for the phase one of their work, which is just the design fee. So we have submitted those information to them.
Okay.
And for deep injection well, we are planning to go and bid it separately outside of the progressive design build in order to qualify for that. So that's much cleaner. Again, yes, I totally agree with you. When you go for any kind of this grant, your procurement process is different. You have a lot of other requirement as far as to comply with their, and sometimes it costs more, compared to if you don't. But on these two, we thought it was very, very beneficial to take advantages of it.
Thank you.
But funding, yes, we definitely are looking for any source of funding that we can, especially for the construction of the water plant. We definitely need to be very creative to make sure that we won't have that much, because the cost is going to be higher than what was originally anticipated 3 years ago.
Right,
A lot higher.
right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Hello again. I think for the sake of time, I'll just tie both the golf courses together and the cemetery. All three of them kind of operate off like an enterprise fund where the revenues go back into the fund to be used again. All three of them, the two golf courses and the cemetery, we didn't put forth project recommendations this year, but we did put it in contingency so that the little bit amount of money in each fund is available should something come up, if we need a new mower at the golf course or something happens at the cemetery. Cemetery is a perpetual care fund. It's a fee charged back to each person as the plots are reserved. But that's the kind of the overview of the financial enterprise fund for the municipal golf course, Lakeview, and the cemetery.
Turn that on. 448 is the Stormwater Utility Fund. This is funded by an assessment that's collected with everybody's tax bill every year that is based on the amount of impervious surface that is available on your lots. This fund, the Stormwater Utility Fund, pays both for staff that performs maintenance on our stormwater system and stormwater pumping stations, as well as major projects that are coming up. About $1 million is left over in the stormwater assessment as it is being billed now, following the expenses into the operating fund that pay for the staff time and equipment. And next week we'll be bringing you the stormwater tax roll, so you'll be hearing about this in a lot more detail next week. So there are a number of state grants that we've received to offset some of the projects in this fund. And the projects that we'll be moving forward with are the historic Marineway seawall, the Thomas Street pump station rebuild, Tropic Isle neighborhood improvements are in this fund because the state of Florida Resilient Florida grant is picking up half of the cost of that project. In addition, there are some smaller projects. Lakeview Drive drainage project connects some drainage problems off of the Lakeview golf course, and replacement of the smaller seawalls throughout the city. Sam already covered the cemetery.
Could I ask you about the pump station at Thomas?
Sure.
It's a big number. Didn't we do work on that like a few years ago? There was like a major job that we did at that pump station a couple years back.
A few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, the pump inside the pump station failed completely.
Yeah, I remember
It
that.
had flooded
Everywhere.
the neighborhood all the way down to Atlantic Avenue. It had already been identified in the Stormwater Master Plan as a #1 priority for replacement. Right now, that the current stormwater pump station there only pumps 18 gallons per minute of stormwater and we'll be improving that to 85 gallons per minute of stormwater to make up for rising water levels and to bring it up into today's needs.
It just seems high. I didn't realize they were that, I mean, 7 million this year and 4.75 next year.
They're expensive.
They are expensive.
I tried to get away with not talking about the garage fund.
Huh? What, the garage?
Yeah.
I know it's coming.
I tried to slip that through, but you caught me. So the garage fund has continually had problems due to during the COVID years when revenues were down, individual departments were not required to pay their rental and maintenance costs for the individual cars and the replacement fees, and therefore we are a couple of years behind in our vehicle acquisitions and replacements. This number represents doing a lease purchase. We bring it to commission every year and ask for this. It would be a lease purchase that would bring us up to current levels and put us back on a solid footing.
But your cost of financing, it's got, I mean, we have a lot of money in the yield that we get when the city invests its funds are less than we're paying for financing on this. So why are we not just doing this internally? Why are we financing?
As I said before, the cost of replacing the vehicles is paid for by each department annually in a rental fee of the original purchase. Traditionally, that rental fee had been calculated on 10% of the original purchase price of the vehicle. So every year that fund was falling shorter and shorter and shorter of being able to replace those vehicles. This year we've recalculated that fund to where it provides a more accurate portrayal of what future cost of the vehicle will be after the 7 to 10 years that it takes us to actually replace those vehicles. So those individual costs in the operations budget of every department went up this year, in addition to us asking to do this lease purchase one time to bring the fleet back up to a standard operational level.
Okay.
And I'm sad to say that was our last slide, so now you can start asking your questions.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
A principal reason I thought it was important for the commission to experience the capital improvement program budget is to highlight and underscore that the predominance of expenditure considerations are not general fund dependent. As we fairly well articulated via the three individuals who presented before you, it comes from a variety of funding sources in this regard. So any considerations regarding operations that are general fund dependent will have to be outside of this particular set of considerations. So again, that goes into the context of presenting a balanced budget recommendation. Also, the to be determined highlights you've referenced in some of the comments, and we were able to clarify some of that here today via the capital improvement program presentation. When the approved budget document is presented, that will be full. That will be all squared away, outlined. This is a working document to give the commission an opportunity to offer its direction, as well as to have an understanding as to why we are where we are with respect to considerations regarding the millage rate, capital improvement program, the various financial resources utilized to execute, implementation of opportunities as noted, etc. So again, thank you very much, Ms. Barletto, Mr. Mitat, Mr. Hajimeri, and I like to think that that was a productive exercise for the reasons stated earlier. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Long. Commissioner Burns. You're not Commissioner Long, you're Commissioner Burns.
Thank you.
Right.
I have a question.
I mean, you
I know
separated
we
first.
do.
I mean, okay.
So for the water meter replacements, and this is for 2025, is it with same company, Badger?
Correct. No, ma'am. No.
Thank you.
I specifically put that in a budget even last year, in anticipation if we do not arrive into the proper resolution with the Badger, because we still have our customer that we have to serve. We're hoping that we will be able to work, or Badger will be work with us to get those meters in a situation that we don't have to worry about replacement for the next few years. But if it doesn't, then we definitely need to do a major overhaul of our, we actually have consultant working on the front-end document and the specification for the meter, type of the meter that we will be needing. So that will be ready to go in case if we end up to that point. But the goal is not to, and definitely it is not the money that is going to be spent on Badger meter. It would be for the brand new, and we have to go to the competitive bidding based on a performance spec that we are completing at this point.
Okay, thank you. And for the playground, Pine Grove playground improvements, we'll have two sheets, one on improvements and one on enhancements. Is this on the school board property, or is there another part for the Pine Grove?
There's two properties there, but we do the lease with the school board where essentially the baseball field, if you've seen it for many years. Right now it's a parking lot while it's a temporary construction of the project. And this would be in partnership with the school board on that leased property and on the park, making it one big park.
Okay. And there was another one. So you have various parks for the pavilions. Do you have a list of the parks that will receive new pavilions?
Yes.
Okay. And the same for these others that say for various restrooms, for various, you have a list that we can be provided?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Commissioner Long.
I'm not going to get into the weeds on anything right now. I just have a few sort of broad comments based on notes I was taking. You know, I'm still trying to get the vibe of where everyone's at with this. I get the feeling we're not quite on the same page, which is fine. Hopefully by the end of all this we can get there. I feel like some of us are operating from a premise that the city has somehow mismanaged funds over the last few years, and now we have to right the ship. I don't agree with that premise. I think that's a false premise. The 3 to 5% tax increase that you referenced, Mayor, that wasn't caused by the city. We've reduced millage, the city's taxes, the last 7 consecutive years. So the fact that taxes have gone up for residents has nothing to do with us. And there's nothing, to me, with our budget that suggests that our staff has done anything outside of what's best management practices. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to discuss if we find fluff projects, which I haven't seen any evidence of that, but if you guys identify some, I'm certainly willing to hear you out. If we find some inefficiencies here, I'm certainly willing to have that discussion. But I'm not willing to just kill projects to meet some arbitrary millage goal. That's not where I'm going to be at with this, just so I'm being clear. In my opinion, we have a responsibility to maintain a certain level of service for residents. And we got to see projects through that have been in the works for years, that have some costs tied to them, that have funding partners. So we might not be on the same page with all this. I'm hoping we can at least find a middle ground at the end of all this budget talk. It seems like it might go for a minute. But, I'll just leave it there for now, because we haven't got deep enough into this to really argue over specifics or agree on specifics. But that's where I'm coming into this from.
Commissioner Marker.
Thank you. As you all know, I come out of the corporate world, so this is what we do for publicly traded companies for a living. And I think it's good that we're looking closely at these budgets. There's always efficiency in budgets. There just is, particularly in a budget of this size. So I'm glad that we're looking for those efficiencies, because I think we have to. I think there's some really big issues that have to be tackled, and I hope we're going at the right pace. Mr. Hajimiri, the water treatment plant, we need a new one. We really got to put our feet on the ground to get that where it needs to be. The residents are really not happy at times with the quality of the water, as you know. And I apologize, you're the one that gets yelled at for that, and that's not totally your fault. I like the direction the mayor is going in, and that we're going to try to keep the millage rate low. I think that's a good thing. I'm not opposed to what Rob said. What I'm going to want to know is what projects can we delay that aren't really that important. That's the way we would do it in the corporate world. There's the must-have list, and then there's the optional list. And there's going to be nobody better in the room than the 3 or 4 people that are in this room to come back to us and tell us what those projects are. And we just need you to be brutally honest. But we're facing some big challenges in the city right now. I don't like that we're not going to touch the golf course, but I'm also looking at the numbers there. It's huge. But I think that we have to be longer term minded about where we're trying to take the city. And I know right now we're in a little bit of a pickle, and we got some big projects that have been delayed for a long time that we have to put on the A list. The Crest Theater is another one. So there are big projects we're going to have to pick and choose, and it's not going to be fun, but we have to do it. We have an obligation to the taxpayers and the residents to do that. And I just had one quick question to follow into what Angela said, that there was $200,000 that was in there for bathroom replacements. Is that beyond parks? Is it in the public areas as well? Well, like the one down at Atlantic and A1A.
That's considered a park, actually.
Okay,
so
good.
we're covered.
Because a lot of feedback on some of those restrooms, and
Yeah, which is why we're so desperate to get that project off
amen,
the ground.
amen. A lot of feedback on that. And they're also, I mentioned this to the mayor, and I'm going to follow up more on this. When I first took office, FPL came in and wanted to meet with me, which I thought was interesting. They have a whole community outreach program, and I ended up meeting with a woman from FPL, and one of the things I learned from them is they're hunting right now aggressively for alternate energy sources. They're doing the things you'd expect. They're putting solar panels in, but one of the things that they approached us about was they're trying to build up their natural gas supply, and sewage treatment plants produce methane and other gases that can be converted into natural gas. And when I talked to Doug about it, there's some equipment we'd have to buy. It may take us a year or two, but FPL might work with us on getting that done if we agreed to sell them the natural gas. And I guess I'm just wondering, asking you guys, are there other potential revenue sources that might be out there where we have some assets that we could more aggressively sell to bring in some revenue from strange places like FPL? And I'm not asking you to tell me right now. I'm just asking you to think about it and see if there's any sources of funding, beyond taxpayer dollars that we might be able to scoop up. I don't know the answer to it, but the FPL thing I think is worth looking at. And maybe they'll buy the equipment for us too. I don't know. Thank you.
Commissioner? I'm sorry?
Okay, so I'm going to jump on with the mayor on some of these things. This restroom trailer comes up every single time. $20,000 a year. By the time the 5 years are over, it's paid for itself. Someone has to tow it, store it, clean it, take care of it. I feel like we should take it off the table. It's not a giant savings, don't get me wrong, but it has added responsibilities with it that I think the cost of it, it's just doesn't make sense. If you don't mind me saying, no offense, obviously. Andrews Avenue. I know this has been, and I was here when residents were coming in and they were concerned, and I agree, it's a very small area, but I think to the point, can we push it out any longer? I realize it's been a very long time, Missy, but it is, do we do the planning now and then maybe look to skip a year on the spending and move it to 2027? Do you think that's necessary immediately? 'Cause
So the Andrews Avenue is being funded specifically out of the gas tax fund.
Okay.
And is there another sidewalk project that you would like to see put into that category instead of Andrews Avenue, or would you like for us to move forward with that?
No, but could we slide it into another project that's currently going on? Is there one that's currently going on that could utilize that money and say a savings elsewhere? That's all I'm asking. I don't know.
Sure, we can look into that.
Okay, thank you. Let's see what I have here. Right, we talked about the building department, and I understand all about those funds, and I'm supportive of that. The beach renourishment, I know we're getting a tremendous amount of funding for that. Does that have a required timeline in which we have to do it? Because I know if we watch the news, it looks like we potentially get 3 big tropical storms coming our way. And I'm just wondering, does that allow us to push that out a period of time?
It does not.
Okay.
Actually, the Corps of Engineers has changed their policy in the last couple of years and are requiring their partners on these projects to pay our full share in advance.
Got it. Thank you. That answers that question. I'm very supportive of the beach renourishment. To my fellow commissioners and mayor, if you go south on the beach to the private property, you can see what happens if you don't renourish, and it's a disaster. There's really no beach.
We've actually extended our southern deadline, our southern extent of the project to
Right.
take in that area by the private beaches, by the private beach on that end, on the southern end, to take care of the issue with the quickly deteriorating beach width there.
Thank you for that. The mobile barrier, gentlemen, is it necessary if you, currently we park the fire trucks or the police vehicles behind an accident to prevent any kind of injury to the residents? Can we hold off on this? Because it looks like you also need to be having the vehicle to tow it, correct? By the photo. The barrier is the whole vehicle?
The photo is not a picture of the actual truck. It's
Okay.
an entire truck.
Okay.
That has the barrier attached to it.
Can we hold off on that? I
It's a legislative appropriation, so we could potentially push it out another year.
Right, because it's
if
not a lot of
required.
funding from the taxpayers, but still, then there again, you have to insure it, store it, park it, care for it, maintain it. So let's see. We talked about the North Swinton roadway. Thank you. And I think I have one other tab. That's the same thing. One more, excuse me, because I think you answered a lot of my questions. Why do I have this tab? Sorry, Mayor. One moment. No, I think I am perfect. Thank you all for your presentation.
Great. You know, on a bunch of these things, and I'm going to hit just, for example, the Lake Ida Road to 36th Street there. You talk about, which is fine that you're using infrastructure surtax, I understand that. But you've got 200,000 here as the water, water and sewer. Clearly it's going to be more than $200,000, right?
No, sir, that's actually an actual expense. So for that one that's already under construction, that's what the
Okay.
cost is.
It
So
just
some of
seems
these
low, that's
projects
all.
have very minimal impact to the water and sewer network.
And it's railroad crossing, this is a TPA project, it's already funded, but I'm just saying, it just seems like the railroad crossing there at $750,000 seems that
We can push that out another year.
there's got to be something else going on there, so, to get that number that high.
It's it's installing an entirely new railroad crossing on, which that by itself, the last one that we purchased was $650,000.
Really? Okay, well,
So-
that's a good explanation. That's when you, on a variety of these things where we're talking about going into certain areas, you mentioned Tropic Isle, and I know that we're doing it in the Northwest, Southwest, and different neighborhoods. You're going in and you're doing pipe replacement and this and all this infrastructure work, underground infrastructure work. do we make sure prior to doing, just because the pipes are old doesn't necessarily mean they're broken? Now, or is it the plan just to get everything replaced, and even ones pipes that are functioning, as opposed to, and that may be the thing, but I'm just, you do that analysis because you have a big number there, and are we positive that that's really the number? Because if the pipes really aren't broken, then do they really need to be replaced?
Correct. There are two major issues at Tropic Isle. One is the asbestos pipe, that they are there, and even though they are in a perfect shape, but asbestos pipe is something that we need to get rid of it. If there is a break on asbestos pipe, that's where your major, the fixing it is not the issue, but how to fix it and preparation for dealing with the asbestos itself is a big problem. So that's one part for the water. For the wastewater, actually, we are not replacing all the gravity line. We are lining those. And those pipes are very old. Most of them are clay pipe.
Right.
And they've been there forever.
Yeah.
Well, not forever,
Yes.
since the community was constructed. And those, they have been TV'd already. So we are putting a liner, which is
So those
it's
you're
like
lining.
a sock inside out that they put inside the pipeline, actually create a pipe within a pipe.
Have the grants stopped for the wastewater? Because we were having that reclaimed water, we got grants for a while. Are they kind of finished?
The grant for the reclaimed water, it comes from Alternative Water Supply Grant that South Florida Water Management District offers that.
Right.
But those are very easy to get. But for the wastewater, that's what I mentioned. Public Work is assisting us to get grant for the both water and wastewater improvement in Tropic Isle. The cost is high, but I committed $7.5 million or so. We spend, and anything above that, it has to be subsidized basically by the grant that we are going to get for entire Tropic Isle. And it's not really worth it once you do the whole area, then go back and start doing, because then it's going to cost much, much more. So we try and do our best. And fire flow was another issue. There are areas within a Tropic Isle that there is a 4-inch pipeline that does not provide enough water for the fire protection. Typically at those dead-end streets, there is no hydrant there. So we are trying to bring that up to the standard.
So, and if I could weigh in on a really broad picture moment, that we have been under direction from Commission for many, many years, that if we go in to make a major improvement in any neighborhood, that we're to fix everything from the lowest pipe to the top of the street light, which really is more of a neighborhood revitalization program like you would have seen back in the 1980s, and nobody does that anymore because it really drives the cost of a project up. So at some point, if the commission is interested in us taking a step back and looking at things as, you know, this is really just a roadway project, or this is really just a SEPTED, which is a community safety type of planning with street lights and that sort of thing, or this is just a utilities project. We would definitely entertain taking another look at some of these major projects in a different light.
Because I think we should, but I mean, we don't have to make that decision today, but I do think that we should try. You want to jump in, I can see that, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and jump.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to offer a consideration, given the feedback having been experienced this evening regarding what the ad valorem rate structure may or may not look like, and given some of the feedback you've all contributed relative to some potential tweaks and adjustments. I would like to take an opportunity to work with the Department of Finance and department directors to offer a couple scenarios, if I may, in time for next week's workshop meeting, so that you all can consider. This exercise was extremely productive in that A great deal of clarity was achieved. A lot of your questions were resolved and answered, and it offers a nexus vis-a-vis the myriad of funds that encompasses the operations of the city of Delray Beach, separate and apart from the general fund. So given the feedback offered relative to the capital improvement program dialogue as they pertain specifically to the general fund, we may be able to take a look at some adjustments to offer a scenario or two relative to what the millage rate picture can look like below the 6.2611 recommendation I offered. So again, we're talking about some potential tweaks. I made notes, and my little analytical mind set is such that I'm prepared to come back with some specific considerations to help that process without compromising level of service recommendations, because again, all of you
We
in
understand that.
essence expressed an interest in maintaining levels of service. The majority of you all did, and this is something we could potentially take a look at. So give me the opportunity.
As you redo this, if you come back, as I said, in all these, there's, as Commissioner Burns has said, there's a variety of things which talk about, you know, like lighting. We're going to do it at different parks or all these things. Could you get us the list of the ones that you're talking about in these as you come back with the
Yes,
with the
sir.
things?
So what, and I would, if I may, Mr. Mayor, that's part of the package. So what I would like to do is to commit follow-up electronic communication information to provide that background information so that you'll have that in advance. That can begin tomorrow, Thursday. We get that information to you. My little exercise will take us into the weekend because, again, we are set for a budget workshop and regular meeting next week to talk about a couple different scenarios based on the feedback and what adjustments that may be possible slightly so that we can offer a defined millage rate recommendation.
Right.
So give me that opportunity and I'll be happy to accept that challenge.
I have a request. I'm interested in knowing if there's any cuts, any more cutting. I'd like to know what's being cut by department.
That's what I'm getting at.
That
What I
sounds
would
good,
like to
right.
do is focus on the capital improvement program side. In other words, capital improvement program adjustments that are general fund dependent. We can take a look at that and come back with a couple scenarios. That's the focus because the sound recommendation is to not compromise level of service. And quite frankly, that is the direction coming from the majority of you all to get to that place. At least, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have an opportunity to continue a downward trajectory with respect to the millage rate, yet striking a balance regarding the economic realities of Delray Beach, Florida. Give me that opportunity to work with everybody involved, and we'll have a couple scenarios available in time for next week's budget workshop meeting. Henceforth, the budget workshop meeting, July 16th, 1 week ago, 1 week from today, that's 7 days, is the nonprofit presentations. And just to be clear in that regard, the proposed budget recommends funding levels to remain the same in that regard. Some of you may have heard of interest in receiving an increase or an adjustment upward from a couple of nonprofit partners. That is not taken under consideration in terms of why we are where we are. 1. 2, the follow-up exercise I've just committed will come back with a couple different considerations that will underscore what is possible in terms of millage rate considerations.
And
Ma'am.
if I may, just a reminder that if you could give us the list of those grants. That
Yes,
we
ma'am, that's part
produced.
of the mix. Yes,
Thank
ma'am,
you.
of course. We'll take care of all that. And again, the individuals with whom I work with on the executive leadership team will be working over the next couple of days to provide email distributions to each of you all, summarizing that background so that we can have a productive experience 1 week from today, 7 days.
That's fine.
So if I can be permitted,
City Attorney, you have
I
something?
just want to, so because we do have some new commissioners, just a reminder that whatever you set the proposed millage rate is, you can't go higher than that.
Right.
So what I would recommend next week is that you direct the manager to give you different scenarios, because once you set that rate, you can't, if you realize the level of service is going to be affected, you're not going to be able to change that. You can only go down.
That
So
will
I
be-
know,
that will
I
be-
know you know that, Mayor, but I
that
just
will
want
be
to make sure
explained. That will
Yep.
certainly be
everybody here
explained.
is clear on that.
and that would be part of my direction as part of the scenarios we come up with in terms of a couple options. And that strikes a balance for everyone.
But I did get a call from someone very angry this morning about code enforcement, so they recommended that we get rid of the department. I just want you to know, and of course they were wrong, huh? Yeah, they said, you got to get rid of that department. Come on. Anyway, so we're not. No, geez, come on. Just saying, I'm not leaving it hanging. We're not getting rid of the department. Give me a break. Is there anything else from any of the commissioners? And we stand adjourned until 3. Can we start at like 6:05? Can we take like a 5-7 minute things?
It's currently 5:59, so
5:59.
6:05.
We'll reassemble at 6:10.